Welcome to Distance Formula Part 2 in general. I would recommend watching Part 1 before you watch Part 2. In this screencast, we will be talking about finding the distance between 2 points in any situation. Prior to this distance formula lesson, it would be strongly recommended that you have a really good understanding of the Pythagorean theorem. And the reason that we use the distance formula is the ability to work with more advanced shapes like circles or working with curves or curved shapes. In part 1, we talked about the distance formula versus a process, and we described the process as finding the horizontal distance, finding a vertical distance, and then using the Pythagorean theorem. So we were creating a right triangle. And that would work well if you're looking at a grid. Not a grid, but the coordinate plane. But what if you have no grid? Or what if creating a grid is not practical? So we do have the distance formula. And the distance formula is used when you are just given the coordinates of 2 points. And the distance formula is using those coordinates. So we would say x1 and y1, that's coming from one of our points. x2 and y2, that's coming from the other point. So let's compare the process that we used in part 1 and the Pythagorean theorem. We're going to see that they're not all that different. We are still looking at the aspects of subtracting the x's. We're still looking at subtracting the y's. And you can even see a little bit of Pythagorean theorem within our distance formula. So the two of them are very closely related. So let's look at an example of when we are going to use the distance formula. And that, again, they're just going to tell you to find the distance between 2 points. So to be clear, our x1 is coming from the x coordinate of our first point. So x1 is 18. y1 is the y coordinate from the first point, which is -4. So y1 is -4. x2, that is coming from the x coordinate of our second point, which is -6. And y2 is coming from the y coordinate of our second point, which is -10. Now that I have identified all of the pieces, I am going to plug them into the distance formula. So something to be careful of is remembering that you are going to subtract, but sometimes you're going to be subtracting a negative. So we will simplify and continue to simplify. And please be careful when you are entering into your calculator. It is always a good idea to input negative numbers in parentheses when working with negatives. So after we simplify, we would be looking at the square root of 520, which is one acceptable answer. If you are using a calculator that simplifies, you might see an answer as 2 square root 130. We just need to remember to avoid the decimal answer unless you're in a word problem or application problem. So that was an example of how we would use the distance formula to find the distance between 2 points.